Bonjour, alors aujourd'hui nous allons jouer à Dire Esther, qui est pas vraiment un jeu, c'est une sorte d'histoire narrative, d'après ce que j'ai compris, on va se promener sur une île, on va à la découverte de cette île et au fur et à mesure de notre avancée, il y a un narrateur qui va nous conter des brides d'histoire qui vont former à la fin, j'imagine, quelque chose, une histoire mystérieuse. Et donc, tout le principe, justement, ça va être de se promener et de découvrir des choses qui vont faire avancer l'histoire. Donc, c'est un jeu, on va appeler ça un jeu, c'est un jeu qui date de 2012, ça a été développé et édité par The Chinese Room, c'est sorti sur PC, sur Mac et sur Linux. Voilà, donc au niveau du lieu, d'après ce que j'ai compris, ça se passe sur une île qui fait partie des Hébrides, donc c'est un archipel qui se trouve à l'ouest de l'Écosse. Voilà. Donc il a eu des prix, donc a priori c'est pas mal. Ça se trouve sur pas cher, sur PC, sur Steam il doit être, je ne sais plus, quelques 5 €. Enfin c'est vraiment. Donc si l'histoire, on va voir ça, si l'histoire est sympa, ça peut peut-être valoir le coup. Voilà, petite info aussi, partout a priori il est en anglais. Il est sorti uniquement en anglais, et là vous voyez cher Esther en français. C'est parce que j'ai mis un patch que je vous indiquerai dans le lien en dessous de la vidéo. Donc en gros ça sera un petit fichier qu'il faudra décompacter à un endroit, je vous indiquerai, et après le jeu passe automatiquement en français, enfin la narration bien sûr est en anglais comme jeu original, mais vous avez la traduction dessous qui est en français, donc pour les gens qui ne comprennent pas forcément l'anglais, ça peut être sympa, et puis pour les autres vous avez le narrateur qui parle en anglais. Voilà, donc on va se lancer dans l'aventure. Je vérifie que tout soit ok. Tout ça, ça a l'air bon. Ok. Je vais quand même regarder au niveau des touches. Ok, mais bon, on est en AZERTY, que ce soit les jeux en anglais, ils sont avec le clavier d'origine en QWERTY, et on va dissocier au niveau des touches. C'est parti. Donc nous avons 4 chapitres. On va commencer le phare, c'est le premier.
Dear Esther, I have lost track of how long I have been here, and how many visits I have made overall. Certainly the landmarks are now so familiar to me that I have to remind myself to actually see the forms and shapes in front of me. I could stumble blind across these rocks, the edges of these precipices, without fear of missing my step and plummeting down to sea. Besides, I have always considered that if one is to fall, it is critical to keep one's eyes firmly open.
Alors je vais mettre un compteur comme j'ai l'habitude de faire de 1 heure. C'est vrai qu'au-dessus d'1 heure c'est un peu long. Et on va voir peut-être, si c'est intéressant, je ferai un let's play, c'est-à-dire je continuerai sur d'autres vidéos sur la suite jusqu'à la fin du jeu. C'est parti. c'est assez joli, hein, pour un jeu qui date de 2012. Enfin, un petit jeu indépendant, parce que c'est pas... Il n'y avait pas le budget de Call of Duty dessus.
Those islands in the distance, I'm sure, are nothing more than relics of another time, sleeping giants, somnambulist gods laid down for a final dreaming. I wash the sand from my lips and grip my wrist ever more tightly. My shaking arms will not support my fading diaries. I have found the ship's manifest, crumpled and waterlogged under a stash of paint cans. It tells me that along with this present cargo, there was a large quantity of antacid yogurt bound for the European market. It must have washed out to sea. God knows there are no longer gulls or goats here to eat it. Donnelly reported the legend of the hermit, a holy man who sought solitude in its most pure form. Allegedly, he rode here from the mainland in a boat without a bottom, so all the creatures of the sea could rise at night to converse with him. How disappointed he must have been with their chatter. Perhaps now, when all that haunts the ocean is the rubbish dumped from the tankers, he'd find more peace. They say he threw his arms wide in a valley on the south side, and the cliff opened up to provide him shelter. They say he died of fever 116 years later. The shepherds left gifts for him at the mouth of the cave, but Donnelly records they never claimed to have seen him. I have visited the cave and I have left my gifts, but like them, I appear to be an unworthy subject of his solitude.
Ok. Le point.
A wonderful sight. The moon cresting the junction between the cliff path and the stone circle. It cast a shadow of the ridge across the beach, all the world as if you had signed your name in untidy handwriting. When someone had died or was dying, or was so ill they gave up what little hope they could sacrifice, they cut parallel lines into the cliff, exposing the white chalk beneath. You could see them from the mainland or the fishing boat, and know to send aid or impose a cordon of protection, and wait a generation until whatever pestilence stalked the cliff path died along with its hosts. My lines are just for this. To keep any would-be rescuers at bay. The infection is not simply of the flesh. They were God-fearing people, those shepherds. There was no love in the relationship. Donnelly tells me that they had one Bible that was passed around in strict rotation. It was stolen by a visiting monk in 1776, 2 years before the island was abandoned altogether. In the interim, I wonder, did they assign chapter and verse to the stones and grasses, marking the geography with a superimposed significance, that they could actually walk the Bible and inhabit its contradiction? Dear Esther, I met Paul. I made my own little pilgrimage. My Damascus, a small semi-detached on the outskirts of Wolverhampton. We drank coffee in his kitchen and tried to connect to one another. Although he knew I hadn't come in search of an apology, reason or retribution, he still spiraled in panic, thrown high and lucid by his own dented bonnet. Responsibility had made him old. Like us, he'd already passed beyond any conceivable boundary of life. I find myself increasingly unable to find that point where the hermit ends and Paul and I begin. We are woven into a sodden blanket, stuffed into the bottom of a boat to stop the leak and hold back the ocean. My neck aches from staring up at the aerial. It mirrors the dull throb in my gut where I am sure I've begun to form another stone. In my dreams, it forms into a perfect representation of Lot's wife, head over her shoulder, staring along the motorway at the approaching traffic in a vacuum of fatalistic calm. I've become convinced I am not alone here, even though I am equally sure it is simply a delusion brought upon by circumstance. I do not, for instance, remember where I found the candles, or why I took it upon myself to light such a strange pathway. Perhaps it is only for those who are bound to follow. Dear Esther, I have now driven the stretch of the M5 between Exeter and Bristol over 21 times. But although I have all the reports and all the witnesses, and have cross-referenced them within a millimetre using my Ordnance Survey maps, I simply cannot find the location. You'd think there would be marks to serve as some evidence. It's somewhere between the turn-off for Sanford and the welcome brake services. But although I can always see it in my rear-view mirror, I have as yet been unable to pull ashore.
Baladait. D'ailleurs, je crois qu'elle est toujours là-haut, elle est tout en haut de la corniche. Ouais, tout en haut, vous voyez là. Au-dessus de la barre du bateau. Juste au coin de la falaise. C'était là.
There must be a hole in the bottom of the boat. How else could new hermits have arrived?
Bon, a priori, on n'a pas l'air de pouvoir rentrer dans le bateau. Donc là, il y a bien une ombre, comme je regarde sur le côté. Là, il y a une ombre complètement à droite. Complètement à droite, approche-toi, elle disparaît un peu. On va voir ce que c'est. aussi la grotte. Il y avait l'air d'avoir des inscriptions. En fait, je l'ai évité parce qu'a priori, au début, il y avait
It's only
quelque
at
chose.
night that this place makes any sluggish effort at life. You can see the buoy and the aerial. I've been taking to sleeping through the day in an attempt to resurrect myself. I can feel the last days drawing upon me. There's little point now in continuation. There must be something new to find here. Some nook or some cranny that offers a perspective worth clinging to. I've burnt my bridges. I've sunk my boats and watched them go to water.
Ok, donc c'est plus calme. Oui, donc ce que je disais juste avant, c'était que au tout début, on a vu qu'il y avait 4 parties. Et la deuxième, de souvenir, il me semble que c'était une grotte beleuse. Donc c'est pour ça que j'ai évité d'y aller tout à l'heure tout de suite en me disant que j'allais peut-être passer au chapitre 2 et manquer des choses. Ce qui n'est pas forcément le cas parce que c'est effectivement narratif, mais c'est très vraiment abstrait. On ne sait pas trop où ça va en venir. Je pense qu'il faut vraiment pas être fatigué pour tenter cette expérience parce que c'est quand même assez mou. C'est vraiment quelque chose ou chiant ou à ambiance, mais ça je ne sais pas, on verra ça un peu plus tard dans l'avancée de l'histoire. Mais c'est vrai que le début c'est un peu plan-plan, on ne sait pas trop où ça va en venir. Le gros défaut, c'est voulu, c'est que le personnage en fait ne court pas. D'accord, je ne sais pas si je peux aller. Là, je vais regarder s'il saute ce personnage parce que les souris, modifier les touches, nager, avancer, reculer, d'accord. Donc non. Ok. On repart. J'imagine qu'on doit pouvoir faire le tour par l'autre côté. Voilà, c'est ça le souci, c'est que à chaque fois, si on se plante de chemin, il faut un bon moment pour faire le tour, pour retrouver l'autre chemin. Alors, à mon avis, qu'est-ce que je fais? Je fais le tour. Je vais essayer d'y aller par la nage. On va voir. Il avance pas vite, hein.
I had kidney stones and you visited me in the hospital. After the operation, when I was still half submerged in anesthetic, your outline and your speech both blurred. Now my stones have grown into an island and made their escape, and you have been rendered opaque by the car of a drunk. When I first looked into the shaft, I swear I felt the stones in my stomach shift in recognition.
Ok. Bon, a priori, on a l'air de pouvoir tomber. Au début, je me suis approché du bord et j'ai l'impression que j'étais bloqué, mais je pense qu'on peut tomber. Parce que juste avant, j'allais vous dire que j'avais un petit peu l'impression qu'on était sur que du narratif et qu'en fait, quoi qu'il arrive, j'avais l'impression qu'on ne pouvait pas mourir. Ce qui n'est pas forcément vrai. Enfin, je ne sais pas. Je vais pas essayer de tomber dans le trou. Que j'ai un doute et que je ne sais pas où je réapparaîtrai, si c'est au début de l'île et qu'il faut tout se refaire.
I've begun my ascent on the green slope of the western
C'est pas
side.
compliqué.
I've looked deep into the mountain from the shaft and understood that I must go up and then find the way under. I will stash the last vestiges of my civilization in the stone walls and work deeper from there. I'm drawn by the aerial and the cliff edge. There is some form of rebirth waiting for me there.
Beaucoup de symbolique dans la narration. J'espère que ça va nous amener quelque part. En tous les cas, là on va la petite maison isolée en haut.
The bothy was constructed originally in the early 1700s. By then, shepherding had formalized into a career. The first habitual shepherd was a man called Jakobsen, from a lineage of migratory Scandinavians. He was not considered a man of breeding by the mainlanders. He came here every summer whilst building the bothy, hoping eventually that becoming a man of property would secure him a wife and a lineage. Donnelly records that it did not work. He caught some disease from his malcontented goats and died 2 years after completing it. There was no one to carve white lines into the cliff for him either. When the oil lamps ran out, I didn't pick up a torch, but used the moonlight to read by. When I've pulled the last shreds of sense from it, I will throw Donnelly's book from the cliffs, and perhaps myself with it. Maybe it will wash back up through the caves and erupt from the spring when the rain comes, making its return to the hermit's cave. Perhaps it will be back on the table when I wake. I think I may have thrown it into the sea several times before.
La musique est sympa. Moi j'aime bien. Je pense qu'on va retrouver l'autre côté de la grotte en allant par là. Ou pas. Ok, donc c'est pas par là. Un chemin long.
He left his body to the medical school and was duly opened out for a crowd of students 21 days after his passing. The report is included in my edition of his book. The syphilis had torn through his guts like a drunk driver, scrambling his organs like eggs on a plate. But enough definition remained for a cursory examination, and, as I suspected, they found clear evidence of kidney stones. He's likely to have spent the last years of his life in considerable pain. Perhaps this is the root of his laudanum habit. Although its use makes him an unreliable witness, I find myself increasingly drawn into his orbit. They found Jakobsen in early spring. The thaw had only just come. Even though he'd been dead nearly 7 months, his body had been frozen right down to the nerves and had not even begun to decompose. All around him small flowers were reaching for the weak sun. The goats had adjusted happily to life without a shepherd and were grazing freely about the valley. Donnelly reports they hurled the body in fear and disgust down the shaft, but I cannot corroborate this story. Climbing down to the caves, I slipped and fell and have injured my leg. I think the femur is broken. It is clearly infected. The skin has turned a bright, tight pink, and the pain is crashing in on waves, winter tides against my shoreline, drowning out the ache of my stones. I struggled back to the bothy to rest, but it has become clear that there is only one way this is likely to end. The medical supplies I looted from the trawler have suddenly found their purpose. They will keep me lucid for my final ascent.
Pas monter là. Ok, faut tomber là. C'est chaud. Bon bah
From here, this last time, I have understood there is no turning back. The torch is failing along with my resolve. I can hear the singing of the sea creatures from the passages above me, and they are promising the return of the gulls.
Donc là on doit être dans le chapitre 2 je pense. Pas mal aux yeux.
There is no other direction, no other exit from this motorway. Speeding past this junction, I saw you waiting at the roadside, a one last drink in your trembled hands.
C'est vraiment sympa. c'est un moteur qui a été acheté. C'est quand même vache. Il y a plein de petites textures de relief.
I'm traversing my own death throes. The infection in my leg is an oil rig that dredges black muck up from deep inside my bones. I swallow fistfuls of diazepam and paracetamol to stay conscious. The pain flows through me like an underground sea.
Je peux pas y aller.
This is a drowned man's face, reflected in the moonlit waters. It can only be a dead shepherd who has come to drunk drive you home.
Sur le son est vraiment sympa aussi, parce qu'on entend l'écoute en profondeur, comme s'ils étaient pas à côté de nous. Un effet de réverbération. Je crois que je sais pas. De toute façon, a priori, il n'y a pas de respiration. On a l'impression d'être sous l'eau. C'est très bien rendu. C'est un jeu cognitif. Genre narration cognitive. Wow. C'est space. On n'ira pas jusqu'au bout a priori. Ah. Bon. C'est vraiment super sympa au niveau de l'ambiance. Encore une fois, je ne sais pas où ça va nous emmener au niveau de l'histoire. Mais là c'est vraiment sympa. Je pense que c'est là où je dirais le plus.
I wish I could have known Donnelly in this
C'est
place.
sympa.
We would have had so much to debate. Did he paint these stones or did I? Who left the pots in the hut by the jetty? Who formed the museum under the sea? Who fell silently to his death into the frozen waters? Who erected this godforsaken aerial in the first place? Did this whole island rise to the surface of my stomach, forcing the gulls to take flight? Fire and soil, I chose fire. It seemed the more contemporary of the options, the more sanitary. I could not bear the thought of the reassembly of such a ruin. Stitching arm to shoulder and femur to hip, charting a line of thread like traffic stilled on a motorway, making it all acceptable for tearful aunts and traumatized uncles flown in specially for the occasion. Reduce to ash, mix with water, make a phosphorescent paint for these rocks and ceiling.
Je commence à voir où ça va en venir. Ici c'est ça, je trouve ça vraiment sympa. Encore le mot sympa. Je pense que c'est ça. Là, on a les symboles, les traits blancs sur les montagnes dont on nous parlait tout à l'heure.
There were chemical diagrams on the mug he gave me coffee in, sticky at the handle where his hands shook. He worked for a pharmaceutical company with an office based on the outskirts of Wolverhampton. He'd been travelling back from a sales conference in Exeter, forming a strategic vision for the peddling of antacid yogurt to the European market. You could trace the connections with your finger, join the dots, and whole new compounds would be summoned into activity. From here, I can see my armada. I collected all the letters I'd ever meant to send to you, if I'd have ever made it to the mainland, but had instead collected at the bottom of my rucksack, and I spread them out along the lost beach. Then I took each and every one, and I folded them into boats. I folded you into the creases, and then, as the sun was setting, I set the fleet to sail. Shattered into 21 pieces, I consigned you to the Atlantic, and I sat here until I'd watched all of you sink.
Donc là on est à 1 heure. Et je pense que l'on va s'arrêter là. Et je pense que je ferai une autre vidéo. Sûrement pour finir. Je suis intrigué quand même. Je suis intrigué. Voilà. Sur ce, à bientôt. Bonne soirée à tous.